I think we'll get started. Good morning. Nice to see everybody. Let us bless. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, sovereign over time and space, who makes us holy with commandments and commands us to engage in the study of Torah. We continue our conversation today about honey from the rock, as we introduce ourselves to the powers of Jewish mysticism. And thank you for that opportunity. It is always a joy to teach you. I see we have somebody calling in. Who is 2766?
That's Sammy.
Okay, so let's mute there. Very good. That's Sammy.
I'm here.
Great. So that's the person who called in at 2766?
Well, actually, it's Ruben's phone.
Okay. So we're going to have to work on some muting there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sammy's going to have to mute himself.
Okay. So let us rename. All right, almost there, friends. Okay, here we go. Brilliant. Ruben, thank you for bringing Sam into the game today.
My pleasure.
Thank you, and welcome, Sammy.
Thank you.
Everybody. So
Yes,
glad to
Sam.
see you. All righty.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. All right, let us continue.
I want to hear what
We're going to do a little bit of review of Atzat Hashem,
Rabbi, can
Hashem.
one of the gates,
you
to do with the hands of heaven and God kind of being in charge and making things happen in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to move into the next chapter. The next gate through which we will walk is Malachey Elyon. Malachim are messengers, and think of Malachim as angels. In this case, these are messengers from on high who find their way into our lives and give us some sense of our spiritual destiny. Very powerful concept. So let us continue. A little bit of review on the fourth gate.
There's an echo.
Yeah, so we're going to have to make sure.
Rabbi, you can mute.
It's horrible.
That's where the
Sorry about that. I think we're going to do that. Okay, got it. We're going to do that. That should get us to the promised land. Okay. All right.
yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, let's go to Ben. Ben, could you read for us this first text? For my plans are not your plans.
Okay. For my plans are not your plans. As we read in Isaiah, for my plans are not your plans. For as the rain and snow comes from heaven and return not there, but soaks the earth and makes it bring forth vegetation, yielding seed for sowing and bread for eating, so it is with the word that comes out of my mouth. It does not come back to me with its task undone. And because we understand this, sometimes we write the abbreviation Bet-He or Bet-Samech-Dalet above written ventures, which means that it is only attempted with the help of God, or we whisper before any plan we set, Im Yirtzah Hashem, if it be the intention of God.
Or sometimes we say, Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will. My sense of this text is when we put the will of God in the context of nature, it's very easy to see the will of God in the natural order, which in a sense is something that happens whether we're here or not here, whether we exercise an impact on the world or we do not. That God is in charge of the heavens, that God is in charge of the rains, that God is in charge of the vegetation yielding forth. That God uses words to bring forth the natural order is a powerful plan, a powerful divine plan. And whether we can impact the world ourselves as human beings, this is going to happen no matter what. Just as the sun rises every day, just as the sun sets every evening, God's will be done. This, of course, is a lot more challenging when we get to realities where things are not so matter of fact. Right? Is it God's will that people find destruction amidst the natural order? Is it God's will that we perish in a hurricane? Is it God's will that a newborn baby doesn't live to see its first birthday? Here it gets more challenging. Here it gets more challenging to think that maybe something's part of God's plan. We've talked in the most extreme levels, right, Devorah?
Yep.
About the notion of blame we render on people who do not follow God's will because they are practicing Zionism or because they are practicing assimilation. These are two particular issues throughout history that have caused some Jews to say, well, God does have a plan, and that plan is to punish those who don't live by God's will. And of course, our Torah reflects that too. If we follow the commandments, God rewards us. If we don't, God punishes us. So there is this deep-seated sense of God's will and God's plans that exists, whether or not it's convenient for us, whether or not it feels good for us. And it's a challenge. It may be true on certain levels, may be true on all levels, but it's not comforting per se. What does it mean to live a life where we say Bezrat Hashem, with the help of God? Let's take it out of the realm of extreme situations that really challenge the notion that everything's Atzat Hashem. What sorts of realities do we turn ourselves over to God's help because somehow we're not sure we can make it on our own?
When someone is sick?
Okay. When we pray the Mishaberach, I think for some of us, we're praying for God's help. That maybe this is going to be more than just some amazing doctor or nurse doing their healing work. We need something beyond these talented individuals. What else?
When we want to do something and we're not sure about the weather?
Okay. Sometimes we're praying for good weather.
And-
Simple as that, just like Honi the circle drawer. You may look at that story and say, well, there's no chance in the world where I would draw a circle and step in it and pray for rain. At the same time, maybe we do our own version of that. May not be so obvious. May not be something we discuss, but we're going to have a simcha, an outdoor wedding. The last thing we want is rain.
Prayer in general.
Yeah. People who are struggling for sobriety will surrender themselves over to God. B'ezrat Hashem. With the help of God, I will find a way to stay out of my own way, to stay out of the way of my own sobriety. Such an individual will turn his or her, their lives over. Of course, I get back to the challenges of this theology. B'ezrat Hashem, my loved one will feel better. What happens if they don't? How do you feel about this?
Rabbi?
Hashem, if it be the intention of God, I will find sobriety. Somebody falls off the wagon. Is it God didn't have a plan for that person's sobriety? Or wasn't intentional about that person's sobriety?
Sometimes then people say, well, that was God's will. And it's part of the overall system.
I understand. So look, thinking about the wisdom, say, of Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was modern and traditional, all in one. He was very well educated. He was the scion of a Hasidic dynasty. He kind of lived in both worlds. As such, he understood that sometimes it's hard to understand that all is in God's hands. At the same time, there's so much mystery in the world that we don't know. And there may be a realm there where Atzat Hashem is the prevailing norm, just as our tradition reflects.
Rabbi?
We don't know one way or another. We have to sort of take that leap of faith. B'ezrat Hashem, we have to sort of surrender ourselves over to the possibilities that exist beyond our own control. Yes, Deborah.
Well, since there's, as you said, there's so little that we know for sure, and when I've heard somebody say, Im Yirtzeh Hashem, I didn't hear B'ezrat Hashem, but I've heard Im Yirtzeh Hashem a lot.
Yeah.
Not lately, but it was always said, like some people say, God willing, you know, and
Right.
and it's not like you're depending on that, but it's like, if all goes well, this will work out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you think? I'm wondering if you think that ultimately this is an utterance of humility. Like, I know before whom I stand, the Holy One of Blessing.
Yeah.
And as such, I know that, yes, I'm created B'Tselem Elohim. I have intrinsic worth. I know the teachings that say the world was created for me. And so I have the capacity to be a force for good in the world. At the same time, even though this partnership really elevates me, at the end of the day, I am living in God's world. And there's probably a reality out there that does in fact govern me, that I may or may not really feel or touch in my life, but I know it's there. And so out of humility, I say, Im Yirtzeh Hashem, if it's God's will, if it's God's intention, I'm good with that as a statement of humility. I'm not comfortable with the concept as an abdication of responsibility.
I agree.
Right? Well, it must not have been God's intention for me to get better. It must not have been God's intention for me to secure sobriety.
Huh. I have a
Puts a lot of
problem.
responsibility. I love the book of Job. I love the book of Job because Job calls God to a high level of responsibility and power and omnipotence. And God says, that may be what you think about me. That's not how I am. You try creating the world. You try fighting Leviathan, the random, natural disaster lurking in the world all the time. You try to fight that fight. So, I think it's a powerful and unique theology in Torah that gives us some sense that maybe God's not nearly as powerful as we need God to be, or God's not as powerful as we would like God to be. I'm wrestling with this.
If he were that powerful, why would we be here?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting thought, right? God actually does tzimtzum. God contracts that power in the form of light. Right? This is the story of Tikkun Olam, right? Where God contracts and God's manifests as light. That light fills all spaces. In order for anything to exist, God has to contract to practice tzimtzum. And the light has to go somewhere, so they put in the jars. It overwhelms the jars. They shatter into a gazillion pieces. Tikkun Olam then becomes our opportunity in life to pick up those pieces and heal the world, to heal that divine light. So
Well, then there's
Please.
Yom Kippur with the whole giving us the power to control.
Yeah, look, I will always wrestle with this notion that I'm created B'Tselem Elohim, but I have free will. And I will always remember the echoes of my teacher, Lawrence Kushner, telling me that free will is overrated. He's thinking about Atzat Hashem when he says that. I fight back because I value freedom, maybe more than most things. And I feel like, at the end of the day, my healing comes a little bit from God's grace, comes a little bit from the powerful impact of doctors and nurses, comes from my own will to heal, and maybe a little luck on the side. At the same time, how do I know for sure that's the only truth? That's no more or less true than God having control over everything. God's plans not being my plans. Ben.
I think something we should consider is that part of what we have the freedom to do is we have the freedom to learn and to study and think, which increases our ability to make choices in the way we make them.
Yeah.
Not everyone has the same freedoms to study Torah.
Ultimately, it seems to me what it means to be Jewish is to live within this creative moral tension. You are free. You and I are free. We are also responsible to live out a life of mitzvot. Mitzvot reflect the will of God and limit our wide open freedom. Introduce the notion that God has a plan. It may or may not be exactly what our plan is. And our opportunity in life is to navigate freely but responsibly. We celebrate this, by the way, next week during Shavuot. We receive the Torah, and as such, we take its wisdom, we take God's love, and we impress it upon our hearts. And in so doing, it renders us responsible for carrying out Torah. Not just living free, as in Pharaoh no longer enslaving us. That's a form of freedom. We call it chofesh. Freedom not to be harassed by Pharaoh, not to be enslaved by the Pharaoh. That is very different than cherut. Cherut is a type of freedom that is in our very hearts. And the cherut that we possess, by the way, cherut, chet, resh, vav, taf, Cherut, transliterated. Cherut is that freedom that says, hey, God's love through Torah is impressed upon my heart. I'm not just free from Pharaoh. I'm free to fulfill the mitzvot. Free to be a force for good in the world. That is God's plan. there's plenty of freedom within that plan, but it's God's plan, not mine. Powerful theology that we consider during Shavuot, our summer harvest festival. We celebrate Matan Torah, or Kabbalat Matan Torah, receiving the gift of Torah. All right, let's take a look at this next piece. I like the word Bashert. So I thought we would take a look at this. Devorah, please.
Excuse me. Bashert, we call two lovers soon to be wed his intended and her intended, without naming the nameless one who it was that intended. And God went out, and Isaac went out to meditate in the fields at twilight. And when he looked up, he saw Rebekah for the first time. And Isaac went out to encounter one who was intended for him. Genesis. When you first fell in love, confess to each other that this romance must now build a home. There was a moment when you understood that the intention was not yours alone. There was a moment when to say anything less than that, since the creation of the universe, it was written that this woman and this man would stand under this tree and agree to build a home together, would be blasphemy. That which the old ones call in Yiddish, Bashert, meant to be, is not a lessening of one's freedom, but rather, when encountered personally, a heightened freedom, a rising to one's destiny. And what had before seemed free now seems shadowed momentarily in unawareness. And this is true of moments of ascent. We understand that there is a kind of freedom and moral responsibility that goes beyond everyday illusions of free will, which is called doing what you were intended to do. Of course, one can evade even this, but not forever. Sooner or later, in one lifetime or another, each soul must accomplish its intended task. We read in the Midrash that the Holy One spends his time arranging meetings and marriages. He takes this one who is unsuspecting from one end of the world and pairs them with that one who was unwilling from the other end of the world.
Okay. I like this text because Bashert is one of those terms that we know of, reflects the notion of being intended for someone. I would modify, of course, this teaching a little bit. 21st century, there are many ways one could experience Bashert, right? Not just between a man and a woman, but between two men or two women, and so on.
Rabbi?
So we include all the ways we can create sacred relationships in this teaching. Yes, Devorah.
Can I get a copy of this? This rings very true for me, not for the man I'm married to now or the man I married the first time, but more to the time when I decided to become Jewish.
Okay.
I would
Wonderful.
really like a copy of this if you could
Yeah.
email it to me.
So very good. So I will send this. What I would say, and one of the reasons why I don't send the entire slide deck to you is because I think you should get the book, and then you'll have all of these readings, should you want them.
I think I might have it, which is why I haven't bought it, but I think
Okay.
it's in a box somewhere.
All right. So I'll be happy to send this to you. Don't let me forget. All right.
I will email you a reminder.
Okay. Thank you. So there is this notion, and I share this with couples under the chuppah, that somehow or another, the intentionality that draws two people together, in many ways, this is a wonderful segue to Malachey Elyon, messengers from on high. Bashert, in a sense, is like a messenger, somebody who comes not to compromise your free will or your freedom in general, but to help you somehow be better than you would have been alone. That there is a destiny, there is a level of becoming, there is an aspirational destination that we can all achieve. We're not going to do so simply by ourselves. there's somebody out there, and I'm not talking just in terms of matrimony, marriage. Bashert can be not only a function of how two people come together in marriage. I think two people can come together in profound friendship. I think of David and Jonathan, for example, who in a sense were Bashert. They came together and found a way to complement what made each a great individual. And somehow together, they had something more powerful. We possess tremendous capacity for moral imagination, for ethical responsibility. Each of us can stand at Mount Sinai individually and collect the Torah and impress the wisdom of Torah and God's love upon our hearts. All that is within our possibility, our capacity. We have the freedom to do that. But somehow or another, the idea that there is a Bashert in the form of a spouse or a best friend or a sibling, even a parent, who can call us to something greater, right? Some greater task that we cannot fulfill on our own. Bashert makes the notion of Atzat Hashem pretty attractive, doesn't it? There's someone out there, and we may not be so sure, right? It might be a surprise. By the way, I would even extend this particular concept to the animal world. I was watching last night the news, and there was a guy, a Jewish guy, I think. He writes a blog called The Doggist. Have you ever heard of it? Well, he adopted this dog named Elsa at the beginning of the pandemic, and you would think that he found his Bashert in Elsa. It was really beautiful. The sweet soul of a dog was just so connected with her human, and vice versa. So I don't know what tradition has to say about Bashert and our beloved animals, but you wonder. Any thoughts, questions, concerns before we leave this gate and go to the next one, Malachey Elyon?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know if you can see me.
I can see you.
Okay. So, as someone who has been divorced and now married again, I think considering the amount of divorce in the world today in the 21st century, it adds challenges to this statement.
Yeah, I'm sure. Tell me more.
Well, just, and I thought of myself at the very last sentence, because my first husband is from Israel and we met there and we really were worlds apart. Does it mean that he was my Bashert for a certain time period and then you outgrow that? Or did I make a huge mistake? Or it just adds a whole other dimension to this idea if you realize that many people do not mate for life.
Yeah, so look, I understand. And I think for a lot of reasons we may read in monogamy to this particular definition of intentionality. I think that life proves that Bashert is not necessarily lifelong
Okay.
opportunity. Look, I will be honest. God God bless my parents for many reasons. Perhaps they might have made a different decision about getting married. They were divorced, and it was difficult for us all. But the extent to which they came together with a creative energy, maybe it was Bashert, maybe it wasn't, I'm not sure, but they certainly created in my brother and me a very positive and lasting legacy that came of their shared life together. And so who knows whether that was the Bashert?
Okay.
You know, maybe that was the Bashert, and maybe it was a focused Bashert, and maybe there were other reasons why their marriage couldn't last. But ultimately, it had a piece of success that came of them building a life together and being drawn together. And I think that's a powerful outcome. And I think it helped them rise to a level of destiny that they wouldn't have risen to if they weren't together. You know what I'm saying? Doesn't tell the whole story. It's not the whole narrative. I want to be careful with this narrative in general, because I believe Bashert can be manifest in more than just a marriage. This context about marriage, and marriage is an important concept because it seems to reflect the importance of having a helpmate in life, having somebody you can live with and who makes you a better person. But when we think about that, how many different ways could that be manifest outside of a wedding, particularly a wedding only between a man and a woman? There's so many other ways we can define this Bashert, it seems to me.
Well, and doesn't Bashert just mean it was meant to be? So it doesn't necessarily even need to be another person. As you were saying, it could be an outcome or an act, or Devorah was talking about becoming Jewish.
Right.
So I guess there are all kinds of things that could be Bashert.
Yes. And by the way, I think it's I don't know if it was edited this way, but the notion that we go from this gate, Atzat Hashem, to Malachey Elyon, that there are messengers in our lives that in a way convey to us an intentionality from God we may not otherwise be aware of.
Rabbi?
And this intentionality, one sec, Devorah, this intentionality could be more limited in time. Not necessarily by design. We don't necessarily know. Things happen, right? Things evolve into a reality, and things change. And so maybe for the time being, our Bashert, whatever form the Bashert takes, is one of those malachim, is one of those messengers that comes into our lives and gives us a chance to kind of become whatever that higher destiny might be. And it may be short-lived. And that may not be comforting if you set out for it to be long-lived. Devorah, please. Thank you.
Well, I agree. I am of the same mind as Iris, but I always looked at it as my first marriage ended in divorce, but we came out with two young men who are very nice young men now, well, not so young anymore, that I get along with very well. And I wouldn't have changed that for anything. And like you said, the Bashert could be for a moment, for that time, for whatever. My younger son once said to me, Mom, you know you had a miscarriage, and I hope you don't mind, but I'm kind of glad that you did. And I looked at him and I said, why? He said, because you've always said you only wanted 2 children. If that miscarriage hadn't happened, you wouldn't have had me. And I thought, oh man, okay. Be careful what you say, because it'll come back to bite you.
Well,
but it's true. I'm glad that he's here. So
as a child who has a similar narrative and just kind of found the right place in the queue, And if somebody who lived through a miscarriage as a parent and as a husband, I suppose the only possibly redeeming outcome of such a miscarriage, because it was brutally painful to deal with in the moment, was that somehow we would be able to rally by virtue of the beautiful children we were able to have, right? And I say that with sensitivity because it took a long time to sort out our fertility issues, my fertility issues, right? And we suffered a lot. And there are people who suffer a lot, whether it's with a miscarriage and the ability to have subsequent pregnancies that come to fruition, or to struggle to get pregnant, period. Very sensitive kind of issue, but I understand the power. And I'm not willing to recognize the sort of the Bashert nature of these things. Not quite ready to do that. If you are, then I invite you to do so. I think things happen and we make our losses matter. Whether it's Bashert or not, I just don't know for sure. You know, I don't know if I was Bashert for my parents such that another pregnancy didn't take hold. That would give me a lot of guilt. You know?
Don't borrow anymore.
Anyway, okay, let's move on to the next gate. Malachey Elyon, messengers of the Most High. All righty, Linda Projansky, you're next.
And he said, "Why do you ask my name?" The Hebrew word for angel is malach, which also means messenger, one who is sent, not cherubic creatures who adorn architecture, valentines, and fantasy. They can be anyone who is sent, just as anyone who is sent can be an angel. It is required only that there be an errand, one message. One angel never performs two missions, just as two angels never go on one mission. Genesis Rabbah 50. There is one great difference between people chosen to be God's messengers and earthly messengers. Well, those on errands of this world almost always know that they are sent and where and why. People chosen to be messengers of the Most High rarely even know they are his messengers, unsuspecting and unaware, consumed by their own plans and itineraries, busy at work on their own schemes. God is already sending them somewhere else. I do not know how many times in one's life one is also a messenger, but for everyone it is at least once. One to whom it is given to know that their errand is completed is blessed and rare. Not so for most of us. Remember only that you are not always going where you are going for the reasons you think you are.
Okay. Amazing, amazing teaching. So the FedEx person that's delivering some musical equipment to me today knows why he, she, or they are coming. To drop off a couple of mini amps. The person knows the job, knows the responsibility, not a divine errand. But you and me are here in the world, according to this teaching, whether we know for sure why or not, we are here, right? Everyone is at least a messenger once. So what does that mean?
Rabbi,
Yes, Deborah.
I think about when I was making calls at the beginning of the pandemic to when I was making calls to our members, and how many people were pleasantly surprised that we would do that. That we would call to see how they were faring, to see if they needed anything. And that, to me, I knew I was doing this errand. I didn't realize how important it would be to some people. It was very gratifying.
Okay, great example. You know what your errand is. You know what your message is. But the person on the other end, at least the one who is genuinely surprised, is not expecting you to enter into their life. And yet they take your message and it uplifts them and inspires them and surprises them. By the way, the reality is I would like our community to have the expectation that we're going to be good at reaching out in moments of need. But it's not such a surprise. But the fact that people would be so grateful and so genuinely surprised means that to them, you are a messenger from the Elyon. You're a messenger bringing good tidings, bringing a spirit of community, making a connection when people are feeling isolated or lonely. Practicing Gimilut Chasadim. So that's powerful, right? You may know what your errand is, but it's received in a blessed and rare way, as the rabbi says.
Actually, I
Yes,
was
Ruben.
just thinking about, I was chatting with someone last night about the classes that I'm taking and how I'm patching someone else into the class. And they said that he was going to bring that back to his congregation because he knows there's probably people there who wishes that they could be in classes.
Yeah, well, sometimes, again, you know what you're doing, you know why you're doing it. So the notion of being a messenger may not be quite as, not quite be the spiritual frame about which we're speaking here, but somebody receives it as a fresh concept that ends up changing their world. In this case, saying, oh, well, gosh, we could do that. That's simple. I could call somebody and kind of be their tugboat and pull them into the harbor of connection, virtual connection. It's exactly what it means, right? That's why you're doing it. There's something really special about the work. So, by the way, knowing about the errand you're running doesn't make it any less holy. It just seems to work within the definition that messengers we encounter don't always know why they've come, but they have this amazing way of fulfilling our lives because they have come. Have you ever encountered somebody who was sort of a messenger like this in your life that you weren't anticipating, and they weren't necessarily anticipating being the messenger in your life, but they brought to you a powerful message that helped change you, helped inspire you, make you a better person, and you were happy to have had that encounter? I think of my parents, despite whatever challenges may have existed between them. In some ways, I thought their role in each other's lives was to complete them just enough to create a lasting legacy in their children that would outlive their marriage. That's not a perfectly happy ending in a way, but it is something that I prize about their creativity and the love they did feel to create two children who made a huge difference.
Rabbi?
In their minds, I'm not speaking my own difference. They would say Yes, Devorah.
I'm thinking about a message you get from a doctor who tells you that the cancer is gone or that they got it all or what like that. That to me is an amazing message. I've gotten it a couple of times.
All right, so help me understand. The doctor does that sort of thing. The doctor is a bearer of good news and sometimes bad news,
Correct.
right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the impact? The doctor's not necessarily approaching you as a malach. The doctor is
Nobody.
doing his or her job, right?
Right.
So, but how has the doctor then become your malach or malacha?
Because the doctor is telling me that either we got it all, which is what I heard the first time, and the second time it wasn't really bad. So second time not so good. I mean, why did I have the surgery at all? But that's a different story. But still, the first time that when they said they got it all and I didn't need radiation, that's an amazing thing to have to be able to celebrate in that and finding out you're pregnant. Two things when you want to be, two things that are good things to hear.
Yeah. So what's interesting, Devorah, and I would invite you to be able to sort of reflect on the impact on a physician or nurse or some other healthcare professional who is devoted to healing and often has the opportunity to bring a message which he or she or they understand is what they need to do, positive or negative news. The extent to which we receive them as kind of a messenger on high is an interesting outcome. So the question is sort of what is it that makes it such a powerful message? That there's a unique healing, for example. It may look like other people's healing, but for you, it's like, it's your everything.
Well,
It like opens up your life to your future, which you may have felt was shutting down on you.
Exactly.
Right?
When I was diagnosed with cancer in 1999, and the doctor said no matter what, he was taking it out, and they would find out later whether or not it was malignant or whatever, because he said, I don't want to go in twice. I'm going to take out whatever I find if it looks bad. And they found out it was completely encapsulated. And that said to me, oh, good, life isn't over. You're not even 50 and you're not dead yet. So,
yeah. So, look, the message is far more powerful than the words uttered.
yes.
You are cancer free.
Yep.
Right. That's a small part of it. It's a really good part of it, but the power of the impact is massive.
True.
Right. Now, it's possible also that the power of the message could be completely devastating, which offers a very powerful challenge, right? Sometimes the messenger brings news that is not easy to embrace.
Or to give.
Or to give. And certainly it's a lot easier said than done, but I take my cue from Rabbi Wolpe in Making Lost Matter, that the messages that we get that reflect the fragility of life or our vulnerability or the terminal nature of life, our mortality, there is an opportunity in the message to make whatever losses come of that matter. Right? See, so if there is a limited amount of life left, we are summoned sometimes by the message. We are sometimes summoned by the messenger to make our lives matter while we have the opportunity. That may or may not be comforting, but it is sort of the rare blessing that comes with bad news. Not that the bad news is utilitarian, Not that it comes to teach us a lesson. Not that it even sets us up for an opportunity to make our losses matter. It's there. It's there, and we're summoned. It's an opportunity. And we do have enough free will to use that opportunity for the better. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Let's move to the next reading. Okay. In many ways, this is it's a couple of my favorite readings and teachings in the entirety of Jewish wisdom. This is one of them. Let's see. Anne, can you see this okay? You want to read this out loud?
Am I unmuted?
You are.
Okay, good. Okay. Sure. Pieces to a puzzle. There must have been a time when you entered a room and met someone after a while you understood that unknown to either of you, there was a reason you had met. You had changed the other, or he had changed you, by some word or deed, or just by your presence. The errand had been completed. Then perhaps you were a little bewildered or humbled and grateful, and it was over. Each lifetime is the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. For some, there are more pieces. For others, the puzzle is more difficult to assemble. Some seem to be born with a nearly completed puzzle, and so it goes. Souls going this way and trying to assemble the myriad parts, but know this, no one has within themselves all the pieces to their puzzle. Like before the days when they used to seal jigsaw puzzles in cellophane, ensuring that all the pieces were there. Everyone carries with them at least one, and probably many pieces to someone else's puzzle. Maybe sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't. And when you present your piece, which is worthless to you, to another, whether you know it or not, whether they know it or not, you are a messenger from the Most High.
I love this teaching. Have you ever built a puzzle and had a hard time finding certain pieces?
Almost always.
Yeah. And that, some of them you're convinced, are lost or got eaten by the dog or
Or the cat took them.
hiding somewhere under the washing machine or whatever.
Or
And then
fell under the table.
under the table, and all of a sudden they sort of pop up like out of the blue. You're not even sure how it happened. Like maybe you overlooked it, maybe somebody else found it, whatever. But the puzzle just kind of shows up and we're able to complete our puzzle. I love this metaphor. We are puzzles. We are puzzling. And there are people, whether they know it or not, who present puzzle pieces to our lives. Pieces that may be absolutely worthless to them, but might possess incredible importance to us. Not only importance, but completion. What does this mean ultimately then? How do we conduct ourselves if we know at any point in time we might possess a puzzle piece that will complete someone else? Or we may be called to accept a puzzle piece from someone else that completes us, maybe helps them fulfill a purpose. What does it mean to be a messenger from the Most High?
Part of the reason you're there.
Okay, so Devori sort of put it into a framework of reason, of rationality. We are here because that's what we do.
It's also
Sort of
part
what
of
it means to be human. To be human is to fulfill other people, to complete their lives. to be completed by them. That's just sort of a reasonable and rational role that we play in the world.
Well, it also goes along with being present. How many people are in, you're with a group of people and they're all moving about and your mind is somewhere else. And they talk about being present in the moment. Don't be looking at what's on your to-do list. Don't be thinking about what the laundry you have to do later, blah, blah, blah. But be present in the moment so that if somebody comes up to you or somebody says something that resonates with you that you would have missed had you continued on your journey in your mind somewhere.
Well, your comment definitely suggests that if we have this magnificent potential to complete someone else's puzzle or to be on the receiving end of someone else completing our puzzle, we're called to a level of attention, paying attention to these possibilities. It requires a certain vigilance, certain awareness of the potential that at any point in time, somebody's going to give us a puzzle piece that's going to complete our lives. Strikes me as a bit tiring to be so focused and intentional and hyper aware all the time. So I would comfort you, try to comfort you at least, by saying, perhaps this is the type of teaching we try to practice with consistency over time. There may be moments that are just so mundane and not so potential filled that we may not receive that piece of the puzzle. We may not be required to give one. The truth of the matter is sometimes these things happen accidentally, right? We could be in a moment where hypervigilance is exhausting and we're not up to it, and we still may fulfill someone's life. So it gives us maybe some relief that in case we're not hypervigilant, we still may be able to accomplish the job. We might not be in the mood. We might not have the intentionality. We might not be paying attention, but somebody else, even by accident, seeming accident, might end up in our lives and somehow complete us, help us find our purpose, help us understand the nature of our Bashert, help us comprehend something of God's plan, to assist us in figuring out how best to be a force for good, and to act not as though everything is in God's plan, but depends sometimes on how we behave in the world. Well, believe it or not, we've come to the end of our class. And I want to thank you. We'll continue with some more readings on Malachey Elyon. Next time, we're going to look at the sixth gate, which is Gilgulim, circles of return. Circles of return. Kind of like a Jewish reflection on reincarnation and the renewal of souls that happens in the universe. So a little bit of housekeeping before I sign off.
When is our next class?
Yes. Our next class is not, in fact, next Friday because of Shavuot. Okay? So we will resume in 2 weeks. Next Friday is devoted to Shavuot. And so we'll take a bit of a break. And we'll look forward to seeing you on
June 5th?
June 5th. June 5th.
And what time are services for Shavuot?
Okay, so glad you asked. We're doing a Yisker. We're doing a Yisker service. It's all going to be in the bulletin, but we're doing a Yisker service at 10:30 on Friday. And then for Kabbalat Shabbat, we'll weave in elements of the Shavuot experience into our Friday night worship. And we'll include the Aseret Hadibrot, the 10 Commandments, and things like that. And then starting the next night, Saturday night, 9:30 online, we'll have our citywide tikkun. It's not tikkun leil Shavuot because it's not on Shavuot. It's after Shavuot, actually. But it'll be a tikkun that brings together all the congregations in the city, most of them, many of them, at least in the Lakeview, Edgewater areas. And we will have a Havdalah. And my colleagues and I will be teaching on a particular text relevant to Shavuot. And then after that, there will be online learning opportunities. If you've never done this, this is your perfect opportunity to do it in virtual space.
Right.
It goes from 9:30 p.m. to 1 a.m. Usually we go like all night. I've taught like at 3 in the morning before.
So,
Wow.
Rabbi,
Or 2. We're going to finish at 1 this time.
so there'll be nothing Thursday night?
No Erev Shavuot, no.
Thank you.
I will be teaching about Shavuot in our the Jewish Way class that we do. And that will be Tuesday at 11.
The 26th?
The 26th, yes. Mivinim, as we say, understand?
Ken.
Ken.
Okay.
Okay. Shabbat Shalom. See you virtually later.
Good Shabbos.
And thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Everybody.
So welcome.
Hoda.
Thank you.
Blessings all.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
See you later. Lehitraot. Shabbat Shalom.
But shalom.
Bye now.